Hey, this is Jeff. I've had a few people ask me about tips for changing tires. I was going to kind of go over it quickly as I do it. Not trying to set any records or anything, but just figured I'd show you some of the tricks that I've learned over the years. I guess the first thing is just tools. For doing this, I use regular Motion Pro levers, normally 3 of them, some lube, use baby powder for the just to put on the tube on the inside of the tire when I put the new one in. Valve stem remover. I've already removed the valve from the one that I'm playing with right now, and the lock on there, and then a knife if you need anything, and a Motion Pro Bead buddy. So that's basically all that you need. I'll kind of go over a lot of this as I go, and if you have any questions, let me know. So this is a Pirelli Scorpion Rally 140/80/18 for my 950 Super Enduro. It's pretty much shot, so I'm going to go ahead and take it off. I've got a new tire that I was going to try out, so I will give that one a go. Like I said, I've already removed the valve stem from the inside, so the tube is flat on the inside. So I'll get on with it. Normally KTMs have a 13mm rim lock on it. On this bike I've actually replaced it with an aftermarket rim lock, so I'm actually using a 12mm like most bikes. So most bikes have a 12mm rim lock on them. The KTMs just happen to have a 13. So just loosen that all the way up and push it in just to make sure that it's not caught on anything. Same thing with the valve stem there. So from there, normally the big thing is going to be breaking the bead. On some of the bikes and some of the tires like this one, it has a pretty stiff carcass in here, so it takes a little bit. Some of the lighter weight tires, you can actually just push down on it and pop the bead that way. If it is really stiff on there, if you stick your tire lever down in there and then just kind of force it down, you'll feel it kind of pop out of place. And then once you've got it broken, push it all the way around just to make sure that the bead is off of the edge all the way around. Normally what I'll do is I'll spray some lube on here just because I'll flip it over and do the same thing. Normally I'll start with the disc side up to start with, and then move to what normally would be the sprocket side. I've already taken the sprocket carrier and everything off of this bike. If you don't have a sprocket carrier, if your sprocket is fixed on there, I would probably start on the sprocket side just because that'll be easier to do the second side, the sprocket down. Again, just kind of push it down. You'll feel it kind of pop off the bead, or off the edge. And again, just push it the rest of the way around just to make sure that everything is off. And then from here, normally to take the tire off, I'm going to use all 3 of the tire levers. Again, you can't ever have too much lube, so definitely worthwhile to lube it up well. Usually I start kind of little ways across from the valve stem and the rim locker right here. So I'll push down on this side and just kind of lean into it a little bit just to kind of hold it in place. Pop my 3 levers in on the side across from it, probably anywhere from 8 to 10 inches apart. Pull the first one up, and again, a little bit easier if you go ahead and push it down into the drop center. Pull the first one up, pull the second one up, pull the third one up, and when you do that, your middle one should just pop out, and then you should be able to just start working your way around and popping it the rest of the way out. So just kind of force it in there, pop the bead up. And once you get a little ways around, you can just use the same lever because it's much easier to do. You can tell I didn't clean the rim or anything like that, just kind of left it the way it is. It was actually pretty dirty, but I'll clean it after I take the tire off. So you've got one side off there. Go around to the second side. Normally what I do here is kind of do the same thing. So kind of push it in, make sure that you've got lube in there, which I still have lube from when I popped the bead, so relatively simple there. Another neat thing you can do here is just hold it underneath the disc in there just to kind of hold that one in place, and just kind of work your way around. Again, I start with 2 of them, and then as you start to get your way around, you probably could just finish it off with 1, but it just makes it a little bit easier to do it this way. So everybody has their own techniques for doing tires, just depending upon what you like and the way you were taught, and a variety of other things. So at this point, one thing that you'll notice is that the rim is pushed up into the tire on that end. This end is actually where the rim lock and the valve stem are. So from here, I can pull the valve stem up, and I can pull the rim lock in a little bit, and then just push it down, and it'll kind of come right off. Again, you can just kind of have my foot on the wrong thing down there. But yeah, just kind of push it down, and the whole wheel, or the tire, will normally pop right off, like so. So, take that off. I will take my used tire off, pull the tube out. You can see that the tube still has some powder on it. If you notice that there's a lot of like rubber balls in there, that means that your tube has been rubbing on the inside of your tire, and that's not a good thing. So just make sure, that's why I put the baby powder in there. Normally at this step, I'll go ahead and put the valve core back in using my nice little Motion Pro tool there, and I'll set that there. I'm going to go ahead and clean this off while I've got it off, and be back in just a minute. The other thing it's a good time to check for is to look at the inside at the drop center, just to make sure that your nipples are covered on the inside of the spokes and everything. Make sure nothing looks out of whack in there. My duct tape rim strip is getting a little beat up, so probably next time I change the tire, I'll go ahead and pull that all off and give it a really thorough cleaning and everything. So like I said, this is going to be a new Scorpion XC Mid Hard that I'm going to put on. It's actually a 120/118, which is realistically almost the exact same size as the 140/80/18, just depending upon the brand and the tire and everything. So first thing I'm going to do is put a little bit of baby powder. I'll step over here just so it might be a little bit easier to see. But I'll put baby powder on the inside, and then just kind of shake that around. And again, that allows the tube on the inside to kind of move around and not rub around a whole lot. The less friction you have, the better off it is for the tube, and the less heat you build up, especially if you're riding on the pavement. So anytime you open up your tire and you notice that there's you know, like the little rubber balls or anything like that in there, that's usually a good time to check and see, make sure that you put a little bit of extra lube in there. The other thing that I did was I went ahead and put a little bit of air in the tube. Normally the reason that I do that is if it's holding its shape, it definitely is much easier to, it's a little bit harder to put it in, a little bit harder to get the tire on, but that little bit of extra air in there keeps it shape once you put it on, and helps you from pinching it when you're putting in the second level. So if you find that you're pinching your tubes a lot, put more air in it to where you just have enough to kind of hold its shape, not enough that it's like putting in a full tire and everything. So the next thing I do is I look on here just to make sure that there's no directional arrows, just to make sure. Most of the tires these days probably have some sort of a directional arrow on them. But this tire, since it is a little bit more of an off-road tire, it does not have a directional arrow. So I pretty much mount it however I want. So again, the first thing I'm going to do, or not first thing, but kind of lube it up. Put some lube on the outside rim here. Put a little bit of lube on the inside of the other side. That's going to make it a little bit easier to get it on. And then I will start with the rim lock right here. So again, make sure that your tire is starting between the rim lock and the actual rim. And from here, we'll just start to This is usually not too hard to get the first bead on. Depending upon the tire and the tube and all that kind of stuff, sometimes you can actually just fit it on by hand without even messing around with it. This tire, because it's a little bit more of an off-road tire, and it's what is Pirelli calls their XC mid-hard, it actually has a pretty stiff sidewall on it. I'm actually expecting some stuff from the mailman, so I think I'm going to run out and grab that quick. Okay, so like I said, just work your way around. If you have two levers, you can use that, but it's usually not a very big deal. It should go on relatively easily without a whole lot of stress. So now comes the fun part. You got one side on. This is kind of an area that a lot of people tend to have difficulty with. So I usually kind of line up the hole in your rim with the valve stem. You don't have to get it on exactly or anything, but I'll go ahead and start stuffing it in. Sometimes I'll put baby powder on the actual tube itself, especially if it's a brand new one. But I just kind of pick it up, stuff it in there. Again, everybody has their own little thing. Some people, I know a lot of people actually put the tube in and then feed the valve stem in as they're putting the tube or the whole wheel onto the rim. So again, I just kind of eyeball it here and look and see if I've got it just about right lined up where it is, and then I'll push the valve stem down in there, and then you can actually go around the whole tire and push it all down. And this is kind of a little trick that I've learned. It takes 3 levers, or you could always use 2 levers and a spoon or something, but pull these 2 back, and then if you look down in here, you've got a little window that looks right down into the tire and the tube, into the rim, and just push it down with that extra one, and I don't know if you could hear it, but it just popped right in, and you're done. So I've always told people, if you're having to stick your fingers in there, it's easier just to use your tire levers. And I don't know if you can see it, but it's all in there right now. So what I do now, just to kind of keep it there and hold it in place, is I put the nut on, but I don't tighten it down or anything, but just enough to kind of keep it from pulling through. So now all I have to do, spray the lube around on it again, just finish up with this last little bit. So there's another tool that I have here, it's a Motion Pro Bead Buddy. So normally what I do is I'll start, if your valve stem is at 3 o'clock, I'll normally start around 6 o'clock with it, or facing right towards me. So I'll pull it up, again, just get that first side started. Put the Bead Buddy in here, you just slot it down in there and then stick it on one of the spokes. And basically what that does is that holds that bead down for you to where you don't really have to hold on to it or anything. And then from there, just start working your way around. So the reason I start, if you've got your rim lock and your valve stem around 3 o'clock, the reason I start at 6 o'clock is just because that way, as I'm putting these on right here, this is relatively easy. You've got a lot of room to work with, and you don't really have to worry about anything catching. So I can go by the valve stem and the bead lock relatively easily. So the only disadvantage to that is that then when you get around to the other side, it's a little bit harder to get the tire down into the drop center. So once you get it around to about here, where you've got probably 16 inches of the tire left, I usually put a little bit more lube on it here. Kind of where you want it is up underneath it a little bit, but you can just spray it on there. Once you get to this point, you'll start to feel that it's getting a little bit harder to pop the bead over. So I use 2 levers, loosen this one up, put the next lever in probably just like 2 inches across from it. See if I can move it around a little bit and pop that end up. Again, bring it back a little bit, put your other lever in, and then works that. I probably went too far on that one. So again, probably just go about 2 inches. If it's really hard, you can tell I don't have it drop down into the drop center here. So if it feels like it's too hard for you to get it in there, it's just because that's not dropped down enough and there's just not enough room for it. So again, loosen it up just a little bit, go about an inch or two, pop it in. Sometimes when I get to this point and I'm getting pretty close, I'll go ahead, if I've got my third one around, go ahead and pop it in there about in the middle, just because that way once I get this one going, that last one, once I kind of get it most of the way, it's difficult to get that last one in there. So sometimes having it already stuck in there allows you to just pop it over and you're done. So again, if you're really having to struggle with it, you're probably doing something a little bit wrong. But once it starts to get really tight, when you're trying to push the bead over the edge of the rim, best thing to do is make sure that you've got this side pushed down and make sure that you're just taking little bites. So even if you're only taking an inch or two, do that. Once you feel like you're getting pretty close, when there's probably 6 or 8 inches left, put that third tool up in there, because once you get that last one in there, it's hard to stuff it up in there. Pop that one and then just hit that last one and you're done. So at this point, I'll put air in it, then I'll go back through and tighten up the rim lock. And normally I'll put a little bit of extra air in it, let it sit overnight just to make sure that there's nothing wrong with the tube, and put it on and go from there. So that's about it. Hopefully that helps. I'd show a few other things. So again, normally I went ahead and put the air in it. On this tire, there's actually a little bit of a ridge right around the inside, so you can kind of run your finger around that inside edge and just kind of feel it, make sure that it feels like everything is popped out where it's supposed to be. Normally I'll put it at 20 or 25 psi overnight. I'll set this one at 25 just because why not. I'll go through and tighten up the rim lock. People always ask how tight. You should kind of feel it start to really snug up and get tight. So that's about the right amount of torque to put on there. Last thing that I figured I'd discuss a little bit is when you're putting on your valve cap. A lot of people ask about that nut that goes in there. A lot of people run it all the way down and run it right up against the rim. The best place for it is actually up against the valve cap, just because when you do that, it allows, if you do get either low pressure or if the tire happens to slip on the rim a little bit, even with the rim lock in there, it'll allow that valve stem to move a little bit and actually pull in a little bit, where if you have it tightened all the way up against the rim, if your tire slips at all on the rim, it's just going to rip the valve stem out, and then you've got a big flat tire that there's no way to fix. So like I said, I always run it on the outside to where it just is up against the valve cap. So that's about it. Thanks.